Well, welcome. My name is Kate Harmon, and I'm the Director of Cross Campus Engagement. And today I'm really excited to have with us Devon Nevius. Devon is the CEO and shareholder of Upward Technology, which is a Portland-based IT services company. So welcome, Devon. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank
I
you.
thought we would start off with kind of looking at your college career because you were very entrepreneurial. You majored in entrepreneurship at University of Oregon, and you created several businesses. Can you describe a little bit of your life as a college student, why you were so entrepreneurial and the type of businesses that you ended up founding at the time?
Sure, happy to. So I grew up in a family where my mother was actually very entrepreneurial, and she had, I think when I was very young, she had a mural painting business, and then she would make these paintings that she sold at Nordstrom's of these sailboats that she had this little cottage business doing, and then later started a tea company I grew up in Seattle. And I think what I picked up from all that was that the barriers to entry to be an entrepreneur are actually not that not that high in many cases, and all it really takes is energy and enthusiasm and a good idea. And so when I was in college, I worked a couple of summer jobs in between my freshman and sophomore year that were terrible, as so many summer jobs are. And I was miserable doing them. I think I pressure washed apartment buildings like for an entire summer one of those years. And anyway, did not enjoy it. So I eventually decided I was just going to take matters in my own hands, and I started putting flyers out in my neighborhood and the surrounding area for doing landscape work. And within a few weeks, I was as busy as I could be, and it started to feel kind of like a business where I had all the typical constraints you have with a business, where I was dealing with collecting cash, and I was scheduling, and I was doing logistics and managing equipment and all this kind of stuff, and realized as small as it was, I had a little business here. So I parlayed it, and when I went back to U of O in the fall, I started again down there with the exact same tactics of just putting flyers out and using word of mouth and bringing buddies along with me to do the work, and started to slowly but surely build out a real business. And then we started buying. It was all very modest. It was not spectacular by any means, but we were buying, we bought backpack blowers, and we bought power tools and chainsaws, and I had a truck. And so started actually doing some of the things that a real business does, and very much learning on the job, unfortunately, for many of our clients, where we would say, sure, we can do that, we'll figure, and then we would just figure it out, which had mixed results. But that's kind of what you do anyway when you're an entrepreneur. You just kind of figure it out a lot of the time. You're never really prepared for it.
That's great. I know that you, as a college student, you also participated in business competitions. Can you share like what you learned from that experience that really was foundational for what you ended up doing later on in your life?
Yeah, I think that a couple things happened when I entered a school-wide business plan competition my senior year with an idea that actually I still love, and I hope someday I'll be able to do. Out of college, I kind of pursued it briefly, but didn't end up chasing that particular business. But what the process taught me of being in a business plan competition was having to really use your generalist talents, where you have to take your ability to be an inch deep and a mile wide on a lot of different things and apply them all simultaneously. And so it really, of all things, challenges you to ensure that you've thought of every angle and you've taken into account all the different potential risks and facets that will come into the actual execution. And that thought process, basically, as soon as you launch your business, the business plan, you will never open it again in most cases, quite frankly. It's like what they say in the military, your strategy never survives first encounter with the enemy. But the process of going through the projections and the forecasting of everything and thinking about the horizons and the contingencies is where all the values created in the business plan. It's
That's
really preparing the entrepreneur more than preparing the business.
That's an awesome point. Um, well, I know that you came to your current role as owner and operator of your own IT services company in a really interesting way. Can you explain a little bit about how being entrepreneurial in a former position helped you identify the need to optimize the IT services industry that you're in?
Yeah, so I took a pretty traditional path out of school where I went into a business development job like many of my friends did, and climbed the ranks through that. I never lost sight. It was kind of in my DNA, entrepreneurial standpoint, to want to create and take on new challenges. So within the company I was working for, I was able, or it just naturally happened that I was kind of uh, observed as a self-starter. And I think that that's an important thing for a lot of people who are just getting into their careers, because it's simply a willingness to accept new challenges that are unfamiliar, and that's all that there really was about it. So I showed and demonstrated again and again that I was interested in taking on new projects and challenges, and was given an opportunity to start a new division within this company, or help start a new division within this company, for managed services. And managed services is simply outsourcing an IT department for businesses that aren't big enough to have their own. And so I did not know much about IT. I had been effective with selling software and some other similar solutions, but I really didn't know much about that business. But got a real great opportunity and a crash course to learn about both the industry and how to launch a business in the industry, quite frankly, with somebody else's resources. And I think the entrepreneurial track is probably underappreciated in the world as a great way to go out and cut your teeth and feel what it's like to develop all the messaging and build the culture of a team and forecast and resource plan and resource manage and deal with all the different facets you have to deal with as an entrepreneur without necessarily having to put your own money at risk, or as much of your own money at risk. So I got a really good look at the business, and I quite frankly just kind of fell in love with the business model while I was working for somebody else. The downside that I think most any entrepreneur who becomes an entrepreneur will realize, and some will get through it and be okay with it, and some won't, is that you really are at the mercy of someone else, and you're putting all your entrepreneurial talents into helping somebody else build something instead of building something of your own. So at the end, I was miserable doing it for somebody else, quite frankly, and realized that I, quite frankly, probably would never work for anybody else once I left. So I went back and actually really used, I can remember these nights. I would come home from work. I worked a lot. I would come home from work though, and I would work till 11 at night, writing my business plan, and really tapped back into a lot of the experiences I had had at University of Oregon in writing business plans and competing in crafting a new plan for this particular business. And I think I even probably blew the dust off my old business plan that I wrote in college. We ended up winning that business plan competition at U of O with it. And I think we got $1,000 as the prize, which was a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
And utilized a lot of that experience. So it ended up being invaluable. And you kind of end up as an entrepreneur a lot of the time with, if anybody's seen the movie Slumdog Millionaire, where this kid from India keeps getting asked these questions on a game show about certain trivia. And it turns out he's had life experience with direct life experience, as strange as it is, with each one of these things he's being asked about. And being an entrepreneur is kind of like that. You find yourself drawing on different life experiences, really diverse life experiences, ones that you would never relate to business when you're experiencing them originally, but you end up drawing on them when you kind of own your own company for the reasons I mentioned. You're just a generalist, and you have to be decent at a lot of things at the same time, and be willing and able to change gears from one thing to the next all day.
Yeah, that's a really solid point. Well, so I think what's really interesting about your particular story is here you were maybe very entrepreneurial in a company, but miserable. And what I found it really interesting with you is that you were really strategic about trying to identify whether to start your own IT services company or to purchase an existing company that might needed to be rebuilt. So can you describe a little bit about how the kind of activities and processes you use to really research these two different sides of the coin, and why you ended up going the direction you did with getting involved with an existing business?
Sure. Um, so actually, with my departure from my corporate job, for maybe 4 or 5 months, I wrote a business plan. I had saved up some money, which for me was a lot of money. Looking back on it, I really wish I had saved more. I wish I'd been a little bit more diligent. I was pretty lifestyle driven at that time, so I had the nice car and I had a bunch of things I really could have lived without if I was really 100% committed. And so that's one lesson I would say is live meagerly when you're trying to prepare for your business and really get comfortable being um, in a more simple existence without all the being comfortable watching your friends do things that you can't do, knowing that you're investing for later. But I wrote this business plan, and I had actually, while I was at in the job, had found somebody who I thought would be my business partner, and had kind of crafted the business plan with the expectation that I would launch into it with him, and it would involve a major overwork of his business. So it was kind of structured around helping do that. And about a week after I quit, he and I decided it wasn't going to work, which was really a blessing, but decided it wasn't going to work. And so here I just quit my job, and now I needed to kind of start all over again. So at the University of Oregon, or in the world at large, there are some unbelievable resources. You really have the best resources while you're at school. In this case, what I had was the library. So I would go to the library, and you get access to a huge amount of database information from all their free resources there. So I went to the library and I started pulling lists of all the different managed IT companies that were in Portland. And there were like 120 of them. And so I built a spreadsheet, kind of a little CRM spreadsheet, and who the owner was and contact information and kind of a little bit about them in some cases. And then what my status was in working with them. And I started just one by one reaching out to them. So I would lock myself in these little kind of independent work rooms at the library, and would just make phone calls for hours and hours and hours, calling these people and asking if they want to do coffee. And so I'd go have coffee with these different business owners and explain the value proposition that I had some experience in helping to grow a business. Didn't have a lot of the actual engineering experience with IT, but I had some capital and I had a business plan that I thought was going to be unique and create some real market advantages for whoever I could launch it with. And so it was an interesting process because um, I got to do a lot of market testing kind of backwards. Instead of going and talking to customers, instead I was talking to the providers and realizing that the way that they were thinking about it and doing the service delivery, it's a pure service business really. So we're not making a widget. We're really selling people's time and selling value through problem solving to our clients and consultation. And so, but I realized that the way they were thinking about it just wasn't very sophisticated. There's just a lot of room for improvement. Knowing what it must feel like as a business person receiving this kind of a experience from these business owners as they described it. So it was an interesting way for me to market test at the same time as start to try and find a partner. And I realized through the process that quite frankly, the competition, I was going to eat their lunch if I could get out there and do it. A lot of these guys were just asleep at the wheel. So it was both frustrating because I couldn't find anybody, and really invigorating because I, was realizing there was just this huge opportunity. So eventually I did find a person who I ended up partnering with, of course. And got a very good deal, I think, on at the time minority share with an opportunity to earn out to 50%. And so within 2 years, I'd earned out to 50%, and have been going through the process of buying out the last 50% since then.
That's great. Well, I know that in the last 5 years that you've been leading Upward Technology, that you've seen revenue grow by over 500%. Can you explain a little bit like what kind of processes or strategies you've been using to help grow and sort of turn around the company?
Yeah, so I think that one of the very first things we did, we really tackled the business on a lot of fronts simultaneously, and I think that's part of the challenge and the fun of being an entrepreneur. You're kind of like a little bit like a puppeteer in that you have all these strings, and you're kind of going to tweak this one just a little bit, and you're going to really pull this one, and then you back off on this one, you pull this one. So it's kind of the fun and the challenge of it is managing all these diverse pieces. The things we tackled initially: building a brand, building the foundations of a culture, and pivoting our service model, I think, to be a little bit more targeted. And then also, it's probably worth mentioning, we expanded the number of services that we offered. So we kind of did all those things at the same time. I think the thing we did that was most important was the cultural work. And that nowadays is so much of what I'm sure you learn in business school. It really wasn't when I was in business school. The cultural side was more just a byproduct. It wasn't a focal point. And so the world has changed very much. And I think consumers and really are looking for companies that they can align with and identify with and kind of have their own reflection of their internal ethos visible through. And so in that way, the landscape has changed for businesses a lot, and that's a much bigger focal point. The other thing about building culture is that you're designing a system that will attract the kind of people you want. And so building our values and our mission, doing a lot of things that were pre-B Corp. We're now a B Corp, but we're pre-B Corp and trying to align our philosophical opinions of the world with how our business showed up. We're all parts of what we did early. And I think what that did, just creating values, for instance, was a team experience we all went through together to figure out what are the core principles that we really all need to bring, or we need our team to bring if we're going to be successful long-term. How do I know I can trust you? And if we all subscribe to the same values, you're kind of saying, hey, you may have a different opinion about something, you may execute something differently than I would, but I know that if at the core of it, you're trying to achieve these same kind of underlying principles, that's okay. Where we can always work through it. Whereas if integrity, for example, which is one of our values, is something that you're challenged by as an individual, and you have to be kind of sneaky or duplicitous to get things done for yourself because that's your life experience, that's fine, but it just probably won't work for us long term because we'll be incongruent with how we execute things. So the number one thing, I think that there's been a lot of elements that have made us successful over the last five or 6 years that have allowed that growth. But the number one thing for sure is the people. We've been able to attract really good people. And we've done that because we take really good care of them. We've done that because I take less compensation than I could if I was willing to accept, grade people essentially. And I'm doing that because I want to build this for the long haul. It's an investment I'm making. And I think one other thing about starting a business is that, as you go out, you've got this kind of challenge that every business person has to face, which is the fact that you'll hear people say, just do it, just get out there, go, just be tenacious, just pour everything you have into it. And I think that's very true. I think at the end of the day, being a go-getter and just saying, I'm just going to do this is really the leap of faith that's core to every entrepreneur. But at the same time, you have to make sure that you've you're investing your time and resources wisely into something that has a possibility of success. And that balance is a challenge. One of our consultants we've used in the past at Upward often says that it just doesn't matter how powerful your motorboat is. If you put it into a dry stream bed, you're never going to go anywhere. Whereas you could have a crummy raft that you threw together with sticks you found on the side of the river, and if you throw it into a raging river, you're gonna move really quickly, get where you want to go. So one way to really test that is to have good people around. And I think that if you can attract good talent and have good conversations where you're in some ways kind of selling other people on your vision for the business, and they buy into it, then I think that's a good sign that you're onto something.
That's really good advice. Well, we're all now going through this really challenging health and economic challenging period. And I know your business probably is also being affected as many others are. Can you share a little bit about how your particular business is sort of responding to this economic challenge, and like what kind of things are you doing to innovate during this time period?
Yeah, we're definitely feeling it. And I think that although we're lucky, first of all, there's a lot of businesses that, who are restaurant businesses or in food services or other industries that are really, really suffering right now. And so we are in a high demand industry, and we have great clients we have deep long-term partnerships with. So we're lucky there. On the other hand, I mean, we're still down over 25% in just 6 weeks. So it's a big haircut in a short period of time. I think that some of the things we're doing, one is, and I don't think this needs as much airtime here on this conversation, but one is that we're in technology. So the services we provide, the solutions we provide are in very high demand, and they are not going anywhere. You have to forgive me. I have a 2-year-old in the background who's hitting a xylophone. So that's part of working from home. But we have we have an industry where there's a ton of opportunity, and it's a very broad industry. What we've done is really leaned on the goodwill we had built long-term with our team, that of trust, and built through the transparency that we provide as a leadership team. I mentioned that we're a B Corp. That means a lot of things, but one of them is that we take a very strong position on our contribution or minimizing our impact on the environment. It means that we focus on our community and give a lot back to our community. And it also means that we're really, really generous and open book with our people, and have a culture of openness with our people. One of those things we've done is open books when it comes to financials, very transparent decision making. When you're growing up, your parents say, you do it because I said so. And in business, I think a lot of business people still take that mantra of, I'm the leader, you do what I say. And nowadays the world has really changed, and I think there's a lot of value in having an engaged team who become other folks who can tell you what you're missing and can help you understand the blind spots that you don't see. And effectively, they're the ones who have to go work with the clients and get it all done anyway. So they better really have a deep contextual understanding of what you're asking for or where you're going. So we've been able to have really open conversations with our people, and very early we made some decisions about what we're going to do with to get out in front of the problem. One thing I'm really happy about, and I think was a great investment we've been making over the last few years, is building out really good financial projections. So we have a really powerful tool we've built over a long period of time that allows us to model different forecasting scenarios. So we'll model those scenarios, and then we'll share them with the team, not in extreme depth, but in snapshot form, and let them know what the high, medium, low might look like. And based on that information, here's what we're thinking. So everyone took a salary cut. And there's a lot of trust, I think, that we've built in our team that we're cashing in on right now, quite frankly. That's really helping us right now, where our team trusts that when we say this is what we need to do, that they understand this is what we need to do, and they're all rallying around it. So there's a lot of things in terms of our product and services that I'm hoping to do out of this, and I really want to emerge stronger. But I think the place where our innovation has been most valuable is in how our team works together.
That's great. That's great to hear. Well, I think one of the last questions I have for you is, you're a frequent person who gives back to our center by judging our new venture championship competition. I'm curious, as you sort of see our current college students today, if you have had any thoughts about, well, you would have done something different, or if there's any skill sets you wish you would have learned that might have made you an even better leader today as you think back over your career.
Yeah, I think that for me, and everybody has different aptitudes. There's some folks out there who numbers are a natural draw for them. For me, it was not. Math was never a strong suit of mine, and for that very reason, I wish I'd invested a lot more in accounting and financial analysis. I think that I mentioned this forecasting tool a moment ago, and I've really had to learn that tool and understand all the concepts behind it. As an entrepreneur, I kind of started from scratch when I got into it. And one of the things about being an entrepreneur is that it's being well-rounded, and you don't have to be a subject matter expert by any means in even more than two or three different facets of the business, but you have to know enough to have good judgment and to know what's not, and have good instincts. And so working on your weaknesses is probably, I think, one of the pieces of advice that I would offer, not so that you can become an expert in it, but more so that you can have good judgment and be contextually aware of what to believe and what not to believe, what to keep and what to throw out when you're dealing with things. So for me, in my case, that was accounting and finance. And I wish I'd worked more on that, understood how to read a balance sheet, understood how to understand cash flow statements or income statements in a deeper way coming out of school. I think that would have actually helped me accelerate the business a little faster.
Well, that's excellent advice. I really appreciate you spending time with us. Devon Nevius is the CEO of Upward Technology. Thank you, Devon, for joining us today.
Thank you. Go Ducks.